Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Lawrence of statewide news service jbiztechvalley.com. And now, if you could see, he is a columnist. Actually, it says the Capitol Bureau Chief of the Jewish Press. And here's his article right underneath talking about Albany and government.
Right, and I talk about how the government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be, so I'm happy to do that. That's been a nice addition to my portfolio. Anyway,
But
now we have a very special guest with us today, Wendy Burch, who's the Executive Director of the National Alliance of Mental Illness of New York State. And welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, it's...
Is she here to check you out over
I
here,
hope so.
Mark?
I hope so. I need all the checking I can get, you know, because you know what people say about me. No.
All right.
Okay. Anyhow, what is mental illness? Let's start with that.
Well, that's an interesting question. Mental illness it's a brain disorder, and there's a wide spectrum of different illnesses. You know, from schizophrenia to depression. They now categorize post-traumatic stress as part of that, and so it's basically just like any other illness of an organ of the body, and so we're always looking for ways to help treat that.
So I see it's a medical conditions that disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning. Just as diabetes is a disorder of the pancreas, mental illnesses are medical conditions that often result in a diminished capacity for coping with the ordinary demands of life.
Right, and part of the reason why NAMI was started 30 plus years ago was because in a lot of cases people would be diagnosed with a mental illness, and the medical professionals would blame the family. Oh, this was because of the way you raised your kid. Now they were, now they had problems with their, mental capacity, mental functions, and that, it's not true. It's a brain disorder. In many cases, it is genetic.
But can it be a little bit true? I mean, as a rabbi, a counsel, I mean, you're the professional, but like a child is sex abused when they're a child, so then they're all having trouble. So they weren't born, or something like you're saying it's wired,
Certainly trauma plays a big part. Trauma can often be a trigger for mental illness, yes. But you don't have to have trauma in your past to have a mental illness.
So let me ask you, what is normal? What is not mental illness?
I don't think I want to touch that question, but 1 in 4 people are affected by a mental illness, and so
that's a lot. That's 25% of people.
Really,
that is a tremendous amount. When you say mental illness, though, but I mean, I know that there are cases in the Capital District, psychiatric center in the Four Winds. I mean, what would be? I mean, just taking a pill nowadays. I mean, there's so much pharmaceuticals would get them normal. Again, as Mark would maybe define what normal is, but all right, I'm just saying functional. Maybe let's use that word.
There are so many treatments out there. They don't always involve medication. There's cognitive therapies that can also work. A lot of times it's in conjunction with medication, but certainly you're not just going to take medication. You're going to want to go to therapy and work with a therapist. Oftentimes understanding, like we talked about a moment ago, childhood trauma actually helps you to overcome a lot of the limitations that a mental illness could put on your daily life.
A lot of people, again, I don't have statistics, but it just seems to me like 18, 19, 20 years old, maybe college or maybe finding a job. Is that maybe stress related, or there's something part of the human person that, maybe adulthood makes them snap?
Yeah, mental illness can manifest itself at any time, but it is most prevalent in that, late adolescence, 18 to 24.
Why is that?
There are a lot of theories about that. I can't speak to that too intelligently.
What about anecdotally being in a position that you're in? Did you have a background in studying mental illness that brought you here?
I got involved with NAMI because my sister actually was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and really, again, it did start showing around the time that she was in college. And again, we didn't know, as our family, we didn't know what was happening. It took a lot of years to realize that she had an illness, and then to find the right treatment. I mean, you can't just prescribe one pill and it fixes it. It's, you have to figure out it's.
You're right.
It's guesswork. I think
It's a very delicate
Yep.
balance there in terms of the prescriptions and the medications, and that's when someone says, "Oh, they didn't take their meds this morning," and you know that they're a little off, But I mean that respectfully. I mean, you just
one thing about medications is some of these medications don't even really start working for a few weeks, so
Really?
it takes
That's
a little
interesting.
while.
I mean, I've been seeing it under President Ronald Reagan of just institutionalizing or deinstitutionalizing mental people, which, again, as a rabbi, again, I'm not, like you say, a psychologist. I don't want to go, I am not, so I'm not going to say I am, of course. But again, I do deal with people like that. They come to faith. I mean, that's a major, they come to the rabbi or the clergyman. But, is that an issue over here that?
Certainly, as much community-based services that can be provided are so important. I mean, there are times when someone's in crisis, then they're going to need to go to a hospital. But like any person, you want to have a feeling of self-worth, and so to be able to be in the community and have a job, those things are so important to anyone's mental well-being. And so that's usually what we're trying to help people, give them the support they need so that they can go on and be productive members of society and have that feeling of strong self-worth.
So your association is more of a counseling. That's what you would.
Yeah, what NAMI does is we sort of are two-pronged. One is offering support, and the other is advocacy and awareness. So the support side, we have a whole series of programs that we provide, from support groups to actual classes like family to family or peer to peer, where you go to once a week for 10 weeks and you learn not only maybe some tools to help with coping, but also how to navigate the mental health system and where to find resources.
Are those free?
Yes, they are. Yep.
And you're subsidized by state and federal?
Yes,
Private?
and private donations and foundations, yes. And then, the other side of it for us is the advocacy and awareness part. I mean, we do obviously stay abreast of what's going on in the legislature and advocate there, but also just getting the word out awareness-wise as to what a mental illness is. We really want to try and eliminate that stigma.
Sure, and it is a big stigma. And sometimes, even with the laws, you really can't get the job you want, even if you've conquered the mental illness and you want to get back on track.
Is that the major law that you know? I mean, Mark's, I'm the rabbi, he's the reporter in the news.
Sometimes
so
what happens is that, based on mental illness, you get a felony charge, or you get some sort of, you go against the law, and you have a problem, but it's not because you wanted to, it's that your mental illness kind of forced you into a situation.
Yeah.
Then when you try to get your help and you try to get back on your feet, they always ask you, well, have you been, do you have a record, or do you have a history of mental illness or whatever?
And that's one of the huge things that we're fighting for is
privacy.
And the criminal justice system right now. I mean, a lot of people are put into jail and they have a mental illness, and sometimes the crime that they have committed was a result of their illness, but then also they get into jail or prison and they're not treated. And if you go off your medication even for one day, then you have to start the whole cycle over again.
I could back you up because I work in the, and I volunteer in the Jewish prisons, but a lot of other people come, so I see a lot of inmates, and it just breaks my heart because they're there in jail. Anyway, just you'd be depressed. I mean, even the most normal person in the world would be depressed, let alone now they have a mental illness and they're sitting behind bars and they're not getting the proper medication and they're associated, they just, almost like we always say, like dumb crimes that they sit there with, oh, you want to go, hey, get some money, go robbed the CVS drugstore, and they're not even doing it. They're sitting in the back seat, but that's a crime, and it's going to lie. And it's like it's ridiculous.
And a lot of the state is instituting mental health courts so that
Really? I didn't
yes,
know that.
yes, and that way a person can go through that system, and so it's
Is
sort
that
of
county by county? State? Is that a state issue or?
it's not mandated by the state yet, so it's the
Yeah.
individual jurisdiction.
And what would it be that if there's mental
Like a colony
illness?
youth court, and this would be a colony mental health court. So there would be two different types of vehicles for depending
I mean,
on.
if they did a crime, but maybe they're mentally ill, they
Right.
could see some other
Correct.
Right.
kind
Yeah.
of.
They don't have
instead
to
of
go
punishment.
in front of a
In
criminal
fact.
court judge. They can go before a mental health judge
would
or
be
someone,
great.
a judge who's experienced in mental health issues, or a counselor or someone
Right,
who
and
has
then the courts can help them get
Right.
the help. that they
specific
need.
help.
Right.
It's not one size fits all like
Right.
Common Core education tries to do, but we'll go
No,
get
that's
into that.
excellent, because
But
there's a real need for that.
there is. I wanted to ask you, because on the website you talk about suicide prevention. So a lot of people who are mentally ill, I presume, or a significant number, probably do consider suicide at one point or another. Then you have ideas on the website as to what to do, what not to do. Don't be sympathetic, be empathetic. Don't tell them this is what you should do. Tell them, just sort of be supportive and coaching. Can you elaborate more on those types of things?
Yeah, I
or-
mean, when it comes to suicide or really any serious mental illness, or you want to try and be watching for the signs earlier on if you can, so that you can get the person the help before they've gotten to the point where they are, really contemplating harming themselves.
Because it says, don't debate whether suicide is right or wrong, or feelings are good or bad. Don't lecture on the value of life. Don't give advice by making decisions for the person or telling them to behave differently. Don't dare them to do it.
Right. People who are going to take their own lives they do it because they're just in so much pain. They want the pain to stop. So really, what you want to do is help them to address that problem, the pain, whether it's through therapy or whatever, treatment that it takes, so that's what's going to stop a person from not wanting to. No one really wants to kill themselves. They just, in this instance, they want to stop the pain, and so that's really what you want to address.
And don't make a promise of secrecy, because saving a life takes precedence over confidentiality. And loyalty. So I just want people to know, our audience to know, these specifics that are quite valuable on your website. So they really should go
Well,
to
what is the website?
NAMI.
Ours is NAMINYS.org.
Right.
And we have a helpline at our office. It is not really so much a crisis helpline as more helping to find resources. So
Right.
if you or someone you know is in imminent danger of harming themselves, you would either want to get them to the hospital or certainly call a suicide hotline.
Does Jewish Family Services fall into your catchment area? Do you refer people there?
We don't usually refer people to specific hospitals or clinicians or anything, but we do direct them towards resources.
Well, on your website it says Covenant House, so the helpline, Girls and Boys Town. So I'm saying, if you have those
you know what,
specific-
any resources that are out there, of course we want to know about it and put it on our website so people can find it. So absolutely, we would.
All right. Now you say, so you have treatment and support as a button on your website. Also veterans, because I presume not just elderly veterans, but young veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder and other problems. Do you work with the VA? Do you work closely with the VA?
We do.
on that?
We actually have a program that's been implemented just in the last year or two called Homefront. And what it is it's similar to our family-to-family program, which is an evidence-based program for families that is geared towards veterans and their families and service members and their families. And so that's another course that we do. So we do work with the VAs throughout the state.
Maybe you, again, you know the numbers better than I did, but I heard that 50% of the veterans coming out of, well, it was Iraq, now Afghanistan, have, like you say, mental problems.
Yeah, I'm not sure
That's
of
what
the
I heard.
exact percentage, but it has been
It's high.
increasing. I mean, so many homeless veterans nowadays.
And
Really?
what about that? You had a special segment on television recently on another network about mental illness in adolescence. And could you explain what happened there? And it had to do with joining ISIS and was thwarted when the father informed the police. And
Right. I did speak with one of the local affiliates, and it was really more about the fact that when someone is in crisis and someone does need help, there isn't always a place to go right away. You basically can take them to the emergency room, who won't always hold them, or if there's threats or something, you can take them to the police or call the police. And who wants to call the police on a family member? And so what we really need more of is some of these mobile crisis teams. Certain areas of the state have them. I know Columbia County has it, for example, but and I think some others around here. But that way, if someone's in a real mental health crisis, you call them, and they're trained professionals to help a person through the crisis.
what was this local story that had an ISIS connection?
I believe that was out of actually Massachusetts, where that actually had happened.
Yeah. And did you? What was?
I didn't personally have any connection with that particular story.
Okay. But what could be done to address the potential mental illness in adolescence?
One of the things that we really believe is having more mental health education in schools.
Really?
I know that there was a bill proposed recently that I think it could still pass, where it would encourage mental illness education in schools. We at NAMI actually have a couple of different programs. One of them is called Ending the Silence, and what Ending the Silence is a young person who has a mental illness, who is made a lot of headway in their recovery, comes in and they talk to middle school and high school students about their journey and what they've gone through, and at the end, the students are able to kind of ask questions, and it helps to let people recognize the signs of mental illness, and then also eliminate some of that stigma, so people will talk about it, so that people are more apt to get help. And another program that we have is called Parents and Teachers as Allies, and that is a presentation for school professionals, teachers, where again, a family member, someone living with a mental illness, they give a presentation, talk about their journey and what they've gone through, and again, it helps to do the better education around mental illness.
And you have how important in terms of treatment peer support groups?
Peer support is very important. When NAMI was first started, it was really geared towards the families, and then I think it evolved so that we have a lot of peer-run programs as well. We have peer-to-peer, which again is very similar to family, where it's your peers kind of teaching coping skills and giving you tools to navigate the mental health system.
Is peer-to-peer a 5-year range, or is it a 3-year range?
Peer-to-peer is just a course. It's a 10-week course, and then following that, we also have a Connections, which is our peer-run support group. So that would go on.
But do you define a peer as someone who's within a 5-year range, or
not necessarily?
3-year
It's
range?
just someone with lived experience.
Oh, okay. So it's not really because I can imagine that someone who's, let's say, 19 couldn't relate to someone who's 29, even though they've had shared experience.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, but...
I don't know, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. Sometimes you
Yes.
have an older person, you have that grandfather thing that, to an older father's son, older. Why? I mean,
if you have schizophrenia and your symptoms are very similar to someone else's, I think that they could make a connection, whatever the age, as to what they're going through.
or someone has experience. Hey, I went through that.
Yeah.
Also.
Well, schizophrenia, as an example, was treated a lot differently 40 years ago, 50 years ago than it is today.
That's true.
Yeah. And we have different terminology that was for verboten now, but was permitted then. And you could see facilities and how they change the names of certain facilities. Just
Back
like
to
as you watch the old
statistics.
movies and you see that they're, how how they termed it, and you could never get those terms in today's movies.
You know, you're not, like Mark was saying, you're not an old lady, you're a very young lady, but just in statistics, is mental illness on the rise? Again, I just hear these statistics that more people die by suicide than by car accidents. This was like this is a new thing. I mean, maybe because the autos are getting also safer, but on the other hand, to me it breaks my heart. You know, a young person, that's what I'm saying, we were talking about 18, 24, their whole life is in front of them. They're living in such a beautiful country. You know, there's not like we're oppressed or, you know, slaves. And, you know, just to do away with your own life, it just breaks my heart. I mean, I have to counsel people also.
Yeah, I don't know that necessarily there are different studies out there as far as if there are more people nowadays or not, but I think people are more willing to talk about it, which is a good thing, and so more people are
aware,
being diagnosed, better. So, and again, you know, I can't stress enough, mental illness is just like, you know, if you get cancer, you can't stop yourself from getting cancer. You know, it's kind of the same with the mental illness. You know, there are triggers out there, but it's not something that you can potentially avoid unless you go into treatment.
You go to conferences all across the country, I presume?
Yes, we just had our national convention in San Francisco.
So when you hear these stories, does it come up with, is it nurture or nature mental illness? Because also some people say it could be hereditary.
It's definitely, they've been recently identifying genes for different mental illnesses.
So is there this nurture versus nature debate going on for mental illness?
I think that the medical community recognizes that this is a genetic disease that someone, you know, can get. But as we mentioned before, I mean, trauma can
trigger it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But what about children? Also, we're talking about 18, because again, a little bit on the personal level, my son is in New York City, and he actually teaches in a Jewish day school that he says most of these kids are on medicine already. And you're talking about 8, 9 years old, that they need medicine just to sit in a seat and function. Again, my heart just breaks for, you know, that a child has to go through that. But
yeah. I do know that.
I mean, it's a diet. Sometimes, you know, maybe you can't, like you say, prevent it, but there's ways to stop giving the kids so much sugar. If you know, there's. I mean, I
used
don't know.
to chew my lead pencils.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
Well, that's your answer.
I won't say that proper diet and exercise is going to eliminate a mental illness,
Right.
But it does. People who eat right and exercise, it helps. It does help, you know, and especially since a lot of the medications that people are put on, they cause, you know, obesity and, you know, there's a side effect. So, but it does, I've talked to many people who are recovering and doing really well, and they almost all of them point out the fact that when they started eating healthier and getting regular exercise, that their symptoms were less acute. So it certainly helps.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, excellent.
How do you, on a day-to-day basis, be an executive director of this agency, of this organization, do you cope with hearing all these gut-wrenching stories? I mean, you just must really have this steel wall of some sort.
It is, I mean, it is very difficult at times, but to counter that, there are so many inspirational stories of people that have, you know, gotten help and moved towards recovery that, you know, I do, the hardest part for me is, you know, I'll take a helpline call from time to time, and sometimes there's just, I can't help the person, and I think that if we really could revamp the mental health system so that people can, as soon as they're starting to have a problem, can get the help that they need, I think that would go such a long way to I mean, you know, hospitalizations are very, very expensive, and we could, as a country, we could save a lot of money if we could, you know, put a focus on identifying any issues early so people can get the treatment they need earlier rather than later.
Is there any message that you want to get out there? Because I look at bullying maybe as being, and that's what my column was about in the Jewish press, might be attributed somewhat of mental illness on the bullier or the person being bullied. I mean, either way, it could be a mental illness somewhere in that mix. You know, what message do you want to get out to the people that you want to make them aware of regarding this?
Yeah, I think just that, you know, again, there shouldn't be a stigma associated with mental illness. It's an illness like any other. And so people shouldn't be afraid to talk about it and to get the help that they need. And honestly, we really need to take a look at the mental health system and fix what's wrong with it.
When you say talk about it, you're not saying stand up on the school bus and talk about it in an elevator or in a school bus or something, right? Are you saying talk about it to a counselor, talk about it to a teacher or clergy?
I think talking about it to I mean, I don't know that you would necessarily go up to a stranger and start talking about it, but I think, you know, with my own family, like they were I'm not saying that they were ashamed, but they felt like this is our business, and yet, you know, they have neighbors who have the same issues, and if they could just kind of get it out there, people would realize that it's not something to be afraid of.
I went to a conference once, and they actually was for clergymen, not only for all clergymen, and they said, why are we spending, you know, a free lecture? You know, I'm just saying they have professors telling us, because they found out statistics before someone's hospitalized, who did you go see? They always asked, who did you go see? Who was like your last resort? And it was a clergyman. So they wanted to tune us up to saying, hey, man, you're the last link before they're in hospitalized. So, you know, you deal with faith-based help.
We have a great program called FaithNet, and that is reaching out to the clergy because, as you say, that's who people often go to in a crisis. And kind of give the clergy the tools to recognize when someone needs help and to point them in the right direction.
Good. Well, hopefully we can help over here.
And I wanted to, hopefully you can. You may be getting more than you had
Referrals
anticipated.
I'll refer back to you with that.
But, you know, this whole thing with, I often look at celebrities, and, you know, you have a lot of celebrities who commit suicide. Robin Williams, you know, comes to mind. I mean, he just heard that he had the early onset of Parkinson's, and he just couldn't think of living life that way. But then you had Michael J. Fox, who has Parkinson's, and he didn't kill himself, but Robin Williams hung himself, and you know, you just wonder, you know, that must take so much of a separate mindset to be able to just put a rope around your neck and hang yourself. Then you must be numb to be able to do that. I mean, I just can't imagine. Yeah,
or in so much pain. I mean, and just think, if he had just maybe reached out to someone and gotten help, he'd still be with us.
You know, and he may have been, you know, making us all laugh about and learning about mental illness through humor.
Right.
You know, do you know of comedians who do that? And you know, is there
sometimes they say humor is something, an antidote for even sickness. I heard someone worse and said, I overcame cancer, couldn't just humor it, so she became almost like a comedian.
Right.
For herself, but for everybody else.
Is there some sort of network with that, with humor and mental illness?
Not that I'm aware of, but I certainly agree with you that that would definitely
keep your spirits up.
You have to keep your spirits up, and I don't know how you personally do it, being in the position that you're in. I mean, that's just incredible.
Well, I hope we're helping people, so.
Well, yeah, I can imagine, you know. And are you from this area originally, or?
I'm not. I've been in the Albany area since about 2000, so about 15 years or so.
And where were you from originally?
I grew up in Connecticut.
What part?
Middletown.
Is that southern or central?
It's like right in the middle. It's just south
by
of Hartford.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, and then I was in the Army for about a little over 9 years.
Combat unit?
No, I was at we supported a combat brigade.
All right, very good.
Which Army? U.S. Army? Or?
Yep.
And what were you? Did you go overseas or?
Yep, I was stationed in Germany, and then I was deployed to Bosnia for about 9 months or so.
Tough already.
Did you have a different voice than the sweet voice you have now?
No, I think I pretty much sounded the same.
You were in a drill sergeant, that's what they're saying.
You give orders, you have to sound tough.
I guess. I graduated from West Point in 94,
really?
so...
you did? Wow.
Yeah,
There's something special, I should have said it.
Oh, well, that's right. But I got out as a captain, so...
Very nice.
Very good.
Very
So now
nice.
you're a captain for the health, and actually, you know, you're doing such great work, and like I say, it's super needed. So also, you know, that's what I'm saying, to a new computer, you know, America could deal without it, you know, if they don't have the latest computer. But there's so many lives that are at stake, you know, in tremendous amount of numbers, that just to have a normal, good life, that really is more what's, you know, people don't put their, a new breakthrough, but that's important. So that's why I'm saying you're on the forefront of doing good work for people of Capital District in New York, and keep going with what you're doing.
Thank you for spending a half hour with us.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about NAMI and let people know that there is hope out there.
You're very special for the community here, so thank you.
Oh, thank you.